Hello, my name is Silas Callahan, 30 years old. I am the head of the Water Systems Engineering Department at a small construction company in Greensboro, North Carolina, where asphalt roads stretch under the shade of old oak trees, and the sound of car horns rings like a familiar rhythm of the city. But this is not where I was born, nor where my heart belongs. I grew up in Boone, a small town nestled at the foot of the Blue Ridge Mountains, where autumn blazes with red maple leaves and winter blankets everything in pristine snow like a tranquil painting. That's where my childhood began and also where everything in my life started to fall apart. I'm sitting here in my modest apartment in Greensboro listening to the giggles of my twin daughters, Maya and Lily, as they play with building blocks on the floor. They are my light, the reason I get up every day, even though life has never been easy. But today I don't want to talk about the present. I want to talk about the past, about the days when I didn't yet know how dangerous silence in a family could be. I want to tell you about my father, my mother, my little sister Emily, and the man who entered our lives like a quiet storm, sweeping away everything I once called home. Boone, North Carolina, in the early 2000s, was a place where time seemed to flow more slowly. Our small house sat at the end of a dirt road next to a babbling creek. I remember afternoons chasing after my father, Samuel Callahan, through the grassy field behind our house. Dad was tall, with a warm, deep voice, always wearing an old, worn baseball cap. He was a plumber, a man with calloused hands and silly jokes. "Silas, my boy," he'd often say, "water is the lifeblood of everything. If you understand how it flows, you'll understand the whole world." I, just a 10-year-old boy back then, would nod, not really understanding but loving being by his side. My mother, Sandra, was a gentle yet strong woman. She worked at a bakery in town, and every evening our house was filled with the scent of freshly baked cookies. Emily, my sister, 8 years younger than me, was a chirpy little girl like a bird. She had big round eyes, golden blonde hair, and followed me everywhere, even though I'd pretend to complain. "Silas, tell me a ghost story," she'd beg, and even though I was tired from a day of running around, I'd make up tales about ghosts living in the woods for her. Our life was simple but complete until the year I turned 12. That was the year everything changed. Dad started coughing more. At first we thought it was just a cold, but the coughing persisted. He stayed up sleepless at night and hospital visits became more frequent. Mom tried to keep smiling, but I saw her eyes red from crying when she thought no one was looking. One autumn afternoon, with red maple leaves falling in the yard, Dad called me into his room. He lay in bed, thinner than I'd ever seen him, but his voice was still warm. "Silas," he said, taking my hand, "take care of Mom and Emily, okay? You're the man of the family now." I nodded, trying to hold back tears, but inside I wanted to scream that he wasn't allowed to leave me. 2 months later, Dad passed away from lung cancer. I'll never forget that day. Mom sat motionless on the couch, holding Emily tightly, while I stood in the yard watching the creek flow, feeling like the whole world had collapsed beneath my feet. After Dad's death, our house became eerily quiet. Mom still baked, still took care of us, but the light in her eyes was gone. Emily, only 4 years old, didn't understand what was happening, but she felt the emptiness. She stopped singing her silly songs and clung to me even more. I, a 12-year-old boy, didn't know how to fill the void Dad left behind. I just tried to make Mom smile, though her smiles grew rarer. 4 years passed, but the pain never truly left. It just lingered, like a shadow. At 16, I started working part-time at a grocery store to help Mom out. Emily, now 8, was still the chirpy girl, but I noticed she often asked about Dad, as if trying to hold on to a memory she couldn't fully recall. "Silas, did Dad like to sing?" she asked once as we sat by the creek. I told her about the times Dad sang off-key and we both laughed, but I knew she was trying to keep him alive in her mind. Then one day, Mom came home with a strange smile. "I met someone," she said, her voice soft but hopeful. That someone was Raymond Holloway, a wealthy man who owned a real estate company in the outskirts of Boone. He was always impeccably dressed in suits and flashed a smile that I found insincere from the start. "He's kind, Silas," Mom said. "He wants to help us." Raymond entered our lives like a strange breeze. He gave Mom flowers, took her out to dinner, and even bought Emily an expensive doll. With me, he'd pat my shoulder, call me sport, and say things like, "You're going to do big things, Silas." But there was something in his eyes, cold, calculating, that made me shudder. I couldn't explain it, but it felt like he was playing a role in a script only he knew. Just a few months later, Mom announced that she and Raymond were getting married. I wanted to protest, to tell her I didn't trust him, but I saw the light return to her eyes. For the first time in 4 years, she smiled genuinely. I couldn't take that away from her. So I stayed silent. We moved into Raymond's mansion, a large house on a sprawling estate surrounded by tall pine trees. Compared to our old house, this place was like a palace. There was a living room with a grand fireplace, a dining room with a polished wooden table, and a backyard so big I could kick a soccer ball all day without hitting the fence. Emily loved running around the house, and Mom seemed relieved not to worry about money anymore. But for me, this place never felt like home. It was too perfect, too cold, like a beautiful painting without life. Raymond, as I suspected, wasn't the kind man Mom saw. He controlled everything subtly. He decided what Mom wore, what she ate, even how she arranged the furniture. "Sandra, you don't need to work anymore," he'd say, his voice sweet but sharp. "I'll take care of you." Mom nodded, thanking him, but I saw her grow quieter, as if she was slowly becoming a different version of herself. With Emily, Raymond was overly affectionate. He'd stroke her hair, call her little one, and give her gifts, a dress, a pair of shoes, a necklace. Emily, only 8, didn't find it strange, but I did. I saw the way he looked at her, the way he stood too close when teaching her to play chess. Once I caught him sitting next to her on the couch, his hand on her shoulder, his eyes making me want to scream. "Silas, why are you staring like that?" he asked, flashing a fake smile. I didn't answer, just pulled Emily outside to play. I started paying closer attention. Some nights I heard muffled arguments from Mom in Raymond's room. Once I saw Mom wiping away tears when she thought no one was watching. And once, Emily told me hesitantly, Silas' stepdad asked if I wanted to sleep in his room so he could tell me bedtime stories. I said no, but he just laughed. My blood boiled. "Never agree to that, Emily," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "If he does anything weird, tell me right away." But Emily just nodded and smiled. "Maybe I'm just being too sensitive. He's nice, right?" I wanted to say no, he wasn't, but I had no proof, just a feeling like a cold wind running down my spine. By the time I was 17, I started planning to leave that house. I couldn't stand the suffocating pretense of Raymond's world. I worked more hours at the grocery store, saved money, and told Mom I didn't want to go to college. I wanted to learn plumbing and become a plumber like Dad. Mom supported me, but I could see her sadness. "Are you sure, Silas?" she asked. "Raymond said he could cover college costs for a better future." I shook my head. "I want to do it on my own, Mom." In truth, it wasn't just about independence. I wanted to escape Raymond, his gaze, the unease he brought. But I worried about Mom and Emily. I promised myself I'd stay in touch, protect them no matter where I was. I didn't know then that my decision to leave would become the greatest regret of my life. The day I left Boone, Emily hugged me tightly outside the mansion. "Don't go, Silas," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. I ruffled her hair, forcing a smile. "I'll call you every week, okay? And you have to tell me everything." She nodded, but I saw fear in her eyes, a fear I didn't fully understand at the time. I boarded the bus to Greensboro carrying a backpack with a few clothes and memories of Boone. Looking out the window, I saw Emily's small figure standing at the mansion's gate next to Raymond, who waved with his perfect smile. I closed my eyes, trying to shake off the unease. "Everything will be okay," I told myself. But deep down, I knew I was leaving something important behind. Greensboro, when I arrived one summer morning at the age of 18, was a completely different world from Boone. Gone were the babbling creeks and quiet pine forests. Instead, there were the sounds of car horns, scorching asphalt roads under the sun, and concrete buildings standing shoulder to shoulder. I rented a small room in an old apartment complex where the smell of mildew clung to the walls, and the neighbors' arguments echoed through thin wooden partitions. The room had just enough space for a single bed, a folding table, and a mini gas stove, but to me it was freedom. Freedom from Raymond's gaze, from the pretense of that mansion. I started working as a construction laborer at a small site. The work was grueling, hauling cement, digging in the blazing sun, but I didn't complain. Each day, as sweat soaked my shirt, I thought of Dad. He used to say, "Water is the lifeblood, Silas." So after work, I studied plumbing, not just because it was Dad's trade, but because I wanted to feel him still with me, in the pipes, in the flow of water. I found a mentor, Joe, the head of the water systems department at the company. He was a seasoned plumber with gray hair and scarred hands. He didn't talk much, but when he taught, he'd say, "You've got to listen, Silas. Pipes have their own voice. If you don't pay attention, you'll never fix them." I learned to hear the sound of leaks, to find cracks in old pipes, to install water systems for new homes. The work wasn't easy, but it made me feel like I was building something, even if it was just a life for myself. After a short time learning from Joe, I was reassigned to work as a water system installation and repair worker. No more hauling cement or shoveling dirt, but the new job was no less demanding. Every evening after returning to my cramped room, I called Emily. Those calls were the light in my long, exhausting days. "Silas, today I drew a horse," she'd chirp, her voice full of excitement. "Mom said it's really good." I'd smile, picturing her at the dining table in the mansion, colored pencils scattered everywhere. But sometimes her voice would drop. "Stepdad got me a new dress," she said once when I asked what she was up to. But he kept watching me try it on. It felt weird. I gripped the phone tightly, the unease from my Boone days flooding back. I tried to stay calm, but inside a fire was raging. "If he does anything strange, you tell me right away, got it?" I said, my voice trembling with worry. Emily just laughed softly. "Okay, I know." After hanging up, I felt like she was trying to reassure herself more than me. Life in Greensboro wasn't easy. I worked from dawn till dusk, sometimes weekends too, just to cover rent and food. But I never forgot to call Emily. Those calls were how I kept my promise to Dad, to take care of her. Hearing her voice made Boone feel not so far away, like I could still protect her despite the hundreds of miles between us. When I was 21, my life changed again. I met a woman named Jessica at a small coffee shop near the construction site. She was a waitress with curly brown hair and a smile that made my heart skip a beat. Jessica was different from me. She loved to talk, to laugh, and always found ways to cheer me up no matter how tired I was. We fell in love quickly, as if we were both searching for something to fill the voids in our hearts. Just 6 months later, we got married in a small ceremony at City Hall with a few friends and Joe as witnesses. The next year, Jessica gave birth to twin girls, Maya and Lily. When I held them for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt since Dad died. A deep connection, like I'd found a reason to live. Maya, the older by a few minutes, had bright eyes and a curious nature. Lily, smaller and lighter, was gentle, smiling even in her sleep. Looking at them, I vowed to do everything to give them a better life than I'd had. But life didn't go as I dreamed. Jessica started to change after the birth. She became irritable, often arguing with me about money, my extra shifts, the cramped apartment we lived in. "You're never home, Silas," she yelled one night when I came back late, covered in dirt from the site. "I can't keep living like this." I tried to explain, to hold her, but she pushed me away. One morning, when Maya and Lily were just 2 years old, I woke up to a note on the kitchen table. "I'm sorry, Silas. I can't do this anymore. Take care of the girls." Jessica was gone, without a goodbye, without a trace. I became a single father overnight. Our rundown apartment was now just me and my 2 girls. Those first days, I barely slept. By day, I worked at the site, fixing pipes with hands trembling from exhaustion. At night, I changed diapers, made formula, and sang lullabies to Maya and Lily. My off-key voice no better than Dad's. Some nights, when both girls cried at once, I'd collapse on the floor, head in my hands, wondering if I could do this. But then I'd look into their clear, innocent eyes and know I couldn't give up. Joe helped me a lot. He gave me shorter shifts, advanced my pay for diapers and formula. "You're doing good, Silas," he'd say, clapping my shoulder. "Your dad would be proud." Those words kept me going. I started learning about more complex water systems, taking night classes to improve my skills. I wanted to be a technician, not just a laborer. I wanted Maya and Lily to have a better future, even if it meant sleepless nights and exhausting days. Despite the hardships, I never stopped calling Emily. She was 15 now, her voice still chirpy but with a new maturity. "Silas, I got an A in art," she'd brag during one call. But sometimes she'd say things that worried me. "Stepdad comes into my room when Mom's not home," she said once, her voice hesitant. "He just asks about school, but I don't like it." "Emily, if he does anything wrong, you tell me," I said, my tone serious. "Anything." She laughed, but her laugh over the phone sounded hollow. "I'm fine, Silas, don't worry." I wanted to believe her, but the unease never left. I started wondering if I should go back to Boone just to make sure she was safe. But then I'd look at Maya and Lily, sleeping peacefully on the old mattress in the corner, and I knew I couldn't leave them. At 25, life finally offered me a glimmer of hope. After 7 years of relentless work, from hauling cement to sleepless nights studying plumbing, I was promoted to water systems technician at the construction company in Greensboro. No more carrying cement under the scorching sun. I now had a small desk in the office, a salary enough to buy milk and new clothes for Maya and Lily, and a modest dream of a proper house, better than the rundown apartment we lived in. I imagined taking my girls to the park, buying them ice cream, telling them stories about their grandfather Samuel. But before that dream could take shape, a phone call shattered everything. It was an October morning with golden leaves falling across Greensboro's streets. The phone buzzed on the kitchen table as I prepared formula for Maya and Lily. I glanced at the screen, saw Mom's number, and smiled, thinking she was calling to ask about the girls as she often did. But when I answered, it wasn't Mom's voice on the other end. It was Raymond, his tone low and cold, like he was reading a statement. "Silas," he said, "your mother, she's passed away. A hiking accident. I'm so sorry." I stood frozen, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Passed away?" I repeated as if the word wasn't real. "My mom, she never liked hiking." "What happened?" Raymond sighed, a sound I knew too well for its falseness. "She wanted to try something new, Silas. We went hiking together, but she slipped. I tried to grab her, but it was too late." I wanted to scream, to ask why he took my mother, who never liked adventure, up a mountain, but my throat tightened. "I need to see Emily," I said, my voice hoarse. "Where is she?" "Emily's at home," Raymond replied, his voice still flat. "She's in shock, but I'll take care of her. Come back, Silas." There was a slight edge to his tone, almost like a command. I hung up, my mind reeling. Maya and Lily were still playing on the floor, oblivious to the storm that had just hit me. I sank into a chair, hands trembling, trying to process what I'd heard. Mom was gone. Hiking. Slipped. The words echoed in my head like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I took a few days off work, asked a neighbor to watch Maya and Lily, and caught the earliest bus to Boone. On the long ride, I couldn't stop thinking about Mom's voice in our recent calls. She'd talk about Raymond, how good he was, but there was always a hesitation, as if she was convincing herself. I remembered Emily's stories about Raymond's strange behavior, how he'd stroke her hair, give her private gifts, ask questions that made her uncomfortable. Could he have, I wondered, then pushed the thought away. It couldn't be. When the bus stopped in Boone, dusk was settling. The mountain air was frigid, but I felt only the cold in my heart. I took a taxi to Raymond's mansion where Mom and Emily had lived since I left. The house was the same, surrounded by towering pines with warm light spilling from the windows. But it wasn't home. Never had been for me. Raymond opened the door, flashing that smile I always found fake. "Silas," he said, his voice perfectly mournful. "I'm so sorry about your mother. Come in." He led me to the living room where the fireplace crackled. Emily sat on the couch, head bowed, her blonde hair a tangled mess hiding her face. She was 17 now, much thinner than the last time I saw her, her eyes red and bewildered. I knelt before her, taking her hands. "Emily," I whispered, "it's me." She looked up, and for a moment I saw the 8-year-old girl who used to hug me by the creek in Boone, but her eyes were now filled with pain. "Silas," she whispered, then burst into tears in my arms. I held her tightly, feeling my heart break. "Mom." "She fell off a cliff," she sobbed. I squeezed her, fighting back my own tears. "It's okay, Emily. I'm here now." But as I glanced over her shoulder, I saw Raymond standing in the corner, hands in his pockets, his cold eyes watching us. There was something in his gaze. Not grief, not loss, but control. A chill ran down my spine. Mom's funeral was held on a dreary morning with light rain falling on Boone's old oak trees. The small church was filled with neighbors, Mom's old friends and strangers, probably Raymond's business associates. I stood beside Emily, holding her hand throughout the service. She didn't speak, just kept her head down, her shoulders trembling. I wanted to comfort her, but I didn't know what to say. How could I console her when I was numb myself? Mom's casket sat before the altar, covered in white daisies, her favorite flower. I stared at it, trying to picture her face, her gentle smile, but all I could see was her in her final days, her eyes empty when she spoke of Raymond. "Mom, why didn't you tell me anything?" I thought, tears falling silently. After the funeral, people gathered at Raymond's mansion to offer condolences. I stood in the corner of the living room watching strangers pass by, offering hollow words of comfort. Emily sat curled up on a chair, clutching a pillow, her eyes staring into nothing. Raymond moved through the crowd, playing the grieving husband perfectly. He shook hands, thanked people for coming, even hugged a few, his eyes misty. But I didn't believe it. I couldn't. I pulled Emily to the backyard where the air was crisp and smelled of pine. "Emily," I said, sitting beside her on a wooden bench, "tell me what happened. Exactly what happened." She looked at me, her eyes confused. "I don't know, Silas," she whispered. "Mom and stepdad went hiking. Mom said she wanted to try it, but she didn't like hiking. I don't understand." Her voice broke and she buried her face in my shoulder. I held her, trying to stay calm. "Raymond said she slipped. Was anyone else there? Did anyone see anything?" She shook her head. "Just stepdad. He said he couldn't grab her in time." My blood boiled. Just Raymond. No witnesses. Nothing but his word. But I couldn't say that to Emily. Not when she was breaking like this. That night I stayed at the mansion, sleeping in my old room, still smelling of pine and childhood memories. Emily slept next door, but I heard her sobbing through the wall. I wanted to comfort her, but I didn't know how. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with questions. Why did Mom go hiking? Why was Raymond the only one there? And why did he always make me feel like a snake was coiling around my heart? The next morning, I met a police officer at the Boone station. He was middle-aged, with a stern face and a flat voice. "We investigated, Mr. Callahan," he said. "It was an accident. Mr. Holloway said Mrs. Sandra slipped on a cliff. No evidence of foul play." I clenched my fists, trying to stay calm. "Did you check the scene? Did anyone see anything?" He shook his head. The site was hard to access. Only Mr. Holloway was there. We found nothing unusual. I left the station feeling helpless. The police called it an accident, but I didn't believe it. I couldn't. I returned to the mansion, determined to take Emily back to Greensboro with me. "You can't stay here with him," I told her in the living room. "I'll take care of you." But Emily shook her head, her eyes red. "I want to stay, Silas. This is Mom's home. I can't leave." I wanted to argue, but her eyes stopped me. She wasn't just grieving Mom. She was losing herself. I returned to Greensboro after the funeral, carrying grief and unanswered questions. Maya and Lily greeted me with tight hugs, and I held them, hiding my tears. "How's Grandma?" Lily asked, her voice innocent. I couldn't answer. I just hugged them tighter, as if they were the only things keeping me upright. Every night after that, I lay awake, thinking of Mom, Emily, Raymond. I called Emily daily, but her voice grew more distant. "I'm fine," she'd say, but I knew it was a lie. I noticed Raymond often answered the phone for her, saying she was busy with school or sleeping. "She needs time, Silas," he'd say, his voice sweet but cold. I gripped the phone, my unease growing. I started researching hiking accidents in Boone, reading every local article I could find. But there was nothing beyond brief reports. 43-year-old woman dies in hiking accident. No details, no suspicion, nothing. I called old friends in Boone, asking if they knew anything unusual. But no one did, beyond what the police had said. "Raymond's a good guy, Silas," one friend said over the phone, his voice sympathetic. "He loved your mom. Don't overthink it." But I couldn't stop thinking. But bad things, as I've learned, often come in waves, crashing over you before you can catch your breath. Just a few days after the funeral, another phone call shattered my world again. This time, it wasn't Raymond. It was a police officer from the Boone station. "Mr. Callahan," he said, his voice low and cautious. "We just received a report from Mr. Holloway. Your sister, Emily, has run away from home." I felt the blood drain from my face, my hands trembling so much I nearly dropped the phone. "Run away?" I repeated, as if the words weren't real. "What do you mean? Emily would never do that." The officer sighed. "Mr. Holloway said she left a note. It said she needed freedom, that she couldn't handle things after your mother's death. We're looking for her, but we don't have any leads yet." I couldn't breathe. Emily, the little girl who followed me across Boone's fields, who drew sloppy horses and giggled at my ghost stories, wouldn't run away without a word to me. "I need to see that note," I said, my voice hoarse. "I'm coming to Boone now." I hung up without waiting for a reply. I packed a bag, begged my neighbor to watch Maya and Lily again, and rushed to the bus station, my heart pounding like it might explode. When I reached Raymond's mansion, it was pitch dark, with light rain falling on the pine trees. Raymond opened the door, his face somber, but I saw no trace of pain in his eyes. "Silas," he said, his voice flat, "I'm so sorry about Emily. I've tried to find her, but she..." He trailed off, shaking his head as if too heartbroken to continue. I didn't care for his act. "Where's the note?" I cut in, my voice cold. Raymond led me to the living room, where a piece of paper sat on the polished wooden table. I picked it up, my hands shaking. The note was short, just a few lines in black ink. "I'm sorry, I can't stay here anymore. Mom's gone, I need freedom, don't look for me. Emily." I read it over and over, searching for a sign. It was her handwriting, but something felt off. The writing was neat, precise, not the messy, emotional scrawl Emily used in the letters she sent me when I first moved to Greensboro. And the tone, cold, distant, wasn't Emily, not the girl who called me Silas with a chirpy voice. "This isn't Emily," I said, staring into Raymond's eyes. "She didn't write this." He frowned, feigning surprise. "Silas, you're grieving, I understand, but this is Emily's handwriting. I found it on her desk this morning." I gripped the note, wanting to tear it apart. "Emily wouldn't leave me," I growled. "She'd call me, tell me." "What's going on, Raymond?" He placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture I immediately shrugged off. "You need to calm down, Silas," he said, his voice sweet but sharp. "Emily's at that rebellious age. She lost her mom. She's in shock. Maybe she just needs time." I wanted to scream in his face, to punch that fake smile, but I held back. I had no proof, nothing but the feeling that Raymond was hiding something. I went to the Boone police station right after, bringing the note. Officer Harris, the same one I'd spoken to about Mom, looked at it and sighed. "We checked her room," he said. "No signs of a break-in or struggle. This note is our only lead. We've issued a search notice, but..." He paused, his eyes sympathetic. "Sometimes girls her age just want to run." "Emily didn't run." I lost control, slamming my hand on the desk. "She didn't write this note. Did you check the handwriting? Did you talk to the neighbors? Did you investigate Raymond?" Harris frowned. "Mr. Holloway is a respected citizen, Mr. Callahan. He's cooperated fully. There's no evidence this wasn't Emily's decision." I left the station with a crushing sense of helplessness. I knew Emily didn't run away. She was my sister, the one I'd promised to protect. I went back to the mansion, demanding to see her room. Raymond reluctantly led me upstairs and opened her door. The room was the same. Single bed with a light blue blanket, a desk covered in colored pencils, a painting of a horse on the wall. But something was wrong. Everything was too neat, like someone had cleaned up before I arrived. I searched her drawers, her closet, looking for any sign of Emily, but found nothing. No phone, no diary, no scrap of paper except that suspicious note. "She didn't take anything?" I asked Raymond, my voice trembling. He shrugged. "Just a small backpack. I don't know where she went." I stared into his eyes, searching for a crack in his composure, but he was too perfect, too calm. I left the mansion feeling like I was fighting a shadow. Back in Greensboro, I couldn't sit still. I posted about Emily on every local forum, put up flyers across Boone and Greensboro, called her friends, even asked old neighbors. No one had seen her. No one knew anything. I called Raymond daily, asking if he'd found any leads, but his answer was always the same. "I'm doing my best, Silas." I started losing sleep, my mind racing with images of Emily alone somewhere, or worse, held captive by the man I'd never trusted. Maya and Lily sensed my tension. "Are you okay, Daddy?" Lily asked one evening as I sat dazed at the kitchen table. I hugged her, forcing a smile. But inside I feared I'd broken my promise to Dad, to Mom, and to Emily herself. A year passed since Emily disappeared, but the pain and unease never left me. Every day I woke up hoping for a call, a message, any sign that she was still alive. I put up more flyers in Greensboro, called the Boone Police weekly, but the answer was always the same. "No new leads, Mr. Callahan." The note Raymond provided remained the only evidence, but I couldn't accept it as truth. Emily wouldn't leave without a word to me, not her. I tried to keep life going for Maya and Lily. The girls, now 5, were constantly chattering and running around the small apartment with their clear, joyful laughter. But even the happiest moments, when Maya drew a sloppy picture of our family or Lily sang an off-key nursery rhyme, couldn't erase the emptiness inside me. I looked at my daughters and saw Emily in their eyes, in their innocent smiles. I told myself I had to be strong, not just for them but for the promise I made to Dad to protect my sister. My job at the construction company remained steady. I was now a respected water systems technician, often assigned complex projects. But one autumn morning, my boss called me into his office with an offer that made my heart race. "Silas," he said, "we've got a big project in the outskirts of Boone. A new resort. I want you to lead the water systems team there. Are you willing to move there for a few months?" Boone. Just hearing the name twisted my stomach. It was where Mom died, where Emily vanished, where childhood memories were tainted by Raymond's shadow. But I had no choice. The project was a chance for a raise, to save enough to give Maya and Lily a better home. "All right," I said, though I wanted to scream no. "I'll do it." I packed up, moved Maya and Lily to a small rented apartment in Boone's outskirts, just a few miles from Raymond's mansion. The apartment was better than the one in Greensboro, no mildew smell, with windows overlooking a small field, but it couldn't hide the unease of being back here. Every morning I drove past familiar roads, through pine forests and the creek that was once my and Emily's playground. Every corner, every tree reminded me of her, of Mom, of the days I thought our family would stay together forever. The resort project started quickly. I worked with a team installing water systems for luxury villas. The busy work helped me temporarily forget the pain. But every evening, returning to the apartment and seeing Maya and Lily play on the floor, I thought of Emily. I still called the police, checked online forums, but there was nothing new. Emily had vanished into thin air. Then one day, while reviewing blueprints at the site, my phone buzzed. It was Raymond. I nearly dropped my pen. I hadn't spoken to him since our last encounter at the police station, when I questioned him about Emily's note. "Silas," his voice came through, sweet but cold as always. "I heard you moved back. Why don't you visit? Bring the girls. The mansion has a big yard, a housekeeper to look after them. They'll love it." I gripped the phone, feeling like a snake was slithering over me. "I'm busy, Raymond," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. But he didn't give up. "Come on, Silas, we're family. Maya and Lily would enjoy the backyard. I just want to help." I wanted to refuse, to yell that he wasn't my family, but I thought of the girls. Maya and Lily had been cooped up in the apartment all week, and I hadn't had time to take them out. "I'll think about it," I replied, then hung up. That weekend, I reluctantly took Maya and Lily to Raymond's mansion. I told myself we'd stay an hour just to let the girls play, then leave. When we arrived, Raymond opened the door, flashing his perfect smile. "Silas, welcome back," he said, then knelt to ruffle Maya and Lily's hair. "These little princesses are growing so fast." My girls smiled shyly while I stood there, hands clenched, watching his every move. The mansion was unchanged, vast, cold, with white walls and polished furniture. The housekeeper, a middle-aged woman named Helen, took Maya and Lily to the backyard, where a large garden had swings and a slide. "Go play, girls," I said, forcing a smile. But as they ran off, I turned to Raymond, my voice low. "We're not staying long. This is just for the girls." He nodded, his eyes glinting with something I couldn't read. "Whatever you say, Silas. I just want the girls to have fun." We sat in the living room and he started talking about his real estate business as if to distract me. But I wasn't listening. I was thinking of Emily, the note, Mom. I wanted to confront him, but I knew he'd just repeat his lies. That afternoon, Maya and Lily played happily in the backyard. I stood by the glass door watching them run and giggle as Helen pushed the swings. But something kept me from relaxing. I saw Raymond standing at the edge of the yard watching the girls with the same look he'd given Emily, a look that made me shudder. I wanted to call them back immediately, but I didn't want to scare them. "One more hour," I told myself, then we'd leave. When we left the mansion, Maya and Lily were still chattering, talking about playing hide and seek with Helen. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking everything was fine. But the next morning, everything changed. Maya, my talkative, curious girl, went completely silent. She sat in a corner of the room, clutching her old doll, staring into space. I knelt beside her, taking her hand. "Maya, what's wrong? What happened?" But she didn't answer, just shook her head, lips pressed tight. Panicked, I turned to Lily. "Lily, what happened? Was anything strange at Grandpa's house yesterday?" Lily hesitated, her big eyes filled with worry. "We played hide and seek," she said, her voice tiny. Maya was looking for me, and then she just sat down quietly and didn't talk anymore. I hugged Lily, trying to stay calm, but a storm was raging inside me. "Did Maya go anywhere? Did she meet anyone?" I asked. Lily shook her head. "I don't know, Daddy. She just went quiet." I took Maya to the doctor that day. The doctor examined her, saying there was nothing physically wrong, but that she might have experienced a psychological shock. A shock? What could have caused that? I asked, my heart pounding. The doctor shook his head. "Sometimes kids react strongly to changes or unexpected events. Keep an eye on her and give her time." But I couldn't wait. I went back to Raymond's mansion that evening, leaving Lily with the neighbor and holding Maya tightly in my arms. Raymond opened the door, feigning surprise. "Silas, what's wrong? Back so soon?" I didn't waste time. "Maya hasn't spoken since yesterday, Raymond, after playing here. What happened?" He frowned, his voice dripping with sympathy. "I don't know, Silas. The girls just played with Helen. Maybe she's just tired. But I didn't believe him. I couldn't. I stared into his eyes, searching for a crack, but he was too perfect, too calm. If I find out you did anything to my daughter, I growled, leaving the sentence unfinished. Raymond just smiled, patting my shoulder. You're too stressed, Silas. Take the girls home and rest. That night I lay awake, holding Maya close. She was still silent, her eyes wide but empty. I thought of Emily, of Mom, of Raymond. Something was happening in that house, and I knew it was tied to him. I had no proof, but I felt it in my bones. I swore to myself I'd find the truth, not just for Maya, but for Emily, for Mom, and for myself. The days that followed were a taut wire of tension. Maya still didn't speak a word, despite my every effort to draw her out of her silence. Then one day she started drawing. Maya's first drawing was a chaotic mess of red, black, and blue lines. I didn't understand it, but I praised her, hoping it would encourage her. But day by day, her drawings changed. She began sketching the same image repeatedly. A large bookshelf, reaching the ceiling, filled with black-covered books and a small hidden door behind it. In some drawings, there were red scribbles like streaks of blood and small, distorted human figures with faces twisted as if screaming. A chill ran through me as I looked at those drawings. Maya, what's this? I asked, pointing to the bookshelf. She didn't answer, just kept drawing, her small hands trembling. I turned to Lily, who was playing with a doll in the corner. Lily, did Maya ever say anything about a bookshelf? Was there a big one at Grandpa's house? Lily thought for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, Daddy. In Grandpa's office. He said we weren't allowed in there. The office. I remembered my time living in Raymond's mansion. He had a room at the end of the hall, always locked, one that Mom and Emily were never allowed to enter. I called Maya's therapist, describing the drawings and her silence. It could be her way of processing something she witnessed, the therapist said. She may have experienced something traumatic. You should investigate further, but be careful. Don't push her. I hung up, my mind reeling. Investigate further. But how, when I had no evidence, no leads, just the scribbled drawings of a 3-year-old? I started planning to sneak into Raymond's office. I knew it was risky, but Maya's drawings, her whispers, and memories of Emily wouldn't let me sit still. I waited for a night when Raymond was away. The opportunity finally came. It was a rainy evening, the drizzle masking my footsteps as I climbed over the back fence. I knew Helen, the housekeeper, slept downstairs, so I had to be careful. I used a paperclip to pick the lock on the back door, a trick I'd learned from Joe while working on old houses. My heart pounded as I stepped into the dark hallway, lit only by faint moonlight through the windows. Raymond's office was at the end of the hall, its heavy wooden door locked as always. I tried the paperclip, but the lock was more complex than I expected. After minutes of fumbling, I heard a soft noise downstairs, Helen's footsteps. I held my breath, pressing myself against the wall, praying she wouldn't come up. Thankfully, the sound faded and I kept working. Finally, the lock clicked open. I pushed the door and stepped inside, turning on my phone's flashlight. The office was as I'd imagined. A large wooden desk, a leather armchair, and a massive bookshelf covering one wall. It was exactly like Maya's drawings, with black-covered books neatly arranged. I approached, my heart racing. There was something behind this bookshelf, I was sure of it. I felt along the edges, pulled at books, hoping for a secret mechanism like in the movies. Then under the desk I found it, a small button hidden in a wooden crevice. I pressed it, my breath catching. A low crack sounded and the bookshelf began to move, slowly revealing a small iron door. I froze, feeling the blood in my veins turn to ice. From behind the door came a faint sound, not a scream but a moan like an injured animal. I opened the iron door, its rusty hinges creaking in the darkness. A narrow, damp staircase led downward, the smell of mold and metal hitting my nose. I descended, each step cautious, the flashlight trembling in my hand. The air was freezing, like stepping into a tomb. When my feet hit the basement floor, the light revealed a scene that stopped my heart. On an old metal bed under a dim bulb was a girl. As I shone the flashlight on her, I recognized her. It was Emily. My sister, who I thought was gone forever, lay there, gaunt and skeletal. Her hands and feet were lightly chained to the bed frame, her blonde hair matted, her eyes wide but dull, as if she'd forgotten what light was. "Emily," I whispered, my voice choking. I knelt beside her, tears streaming uncontrollably. "Emily, it's me. Silas." She looked at me, her eyes wild, as if she didn't dare believe. "Silas?" she mumbled, her voice weak and broken. "Is it really you?" I nodded, pulling her into my arms, feeling her frail body tremble. "It's me, Emily. I found you." Her tears soaked my shirt as she sobbed, the choked cries of years we thought we'd lost each other forever. I checked the chains on her wrists. They were thin but sturdy, locked with a small padlock. I used my pocket knife to pry them open, my hands shaking so much I nearly dropped it. "I'm getting you out of here," I said, my voice firm despite the chaos inside me. Emily shook her head, her eyes filled with fear. He'll know," she whispered. "He always knows." I squeezed her hand. "He can't hurt you anymore. I'm here now." When the lock snapped open, I helped Emily sit up. She was so weak she could barely stand, and I had to carry her up the stairs. Each step was a battle against fear. Fear that Raymond would return, that Helen would wake, that I wouldn't get Emily out in time. When we reached the office, I closed the iron door and slid the bookshelf back into place. I didn't want Raymond to know I'd found his secret, not yet. I carried Emily out through the back door, holding her like a child. She was terrifyingly light, as if time had drained her life away. I placed her in the front seat of my pickup, wrapping her in my jacket to keep her warm. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice trembling. Emily nodded weakly, but her eyes were still dazed. She whispered something I couldn't hear clearly. I held her hand, fighting the rage burning in my chest. "Don't talk now, Emily. I'll take care of everything." I drove to the apartment, my mind racing with questions. Why had Raymond kept Emily locked away? What had he done to her for the past year? And Maya? Had she seen that basement, heard Emily's moans? I glanced at Emily, now asleep in the seat, and guilt weighed on me. I'd left her behind, failed to protect her as I'd promised Dad. At the apartment, I carried Emily inside and laid her on the bed. Maya and Lily were still at Mrs. Carter's, and I knew I had to act fast. I called Maya's therapist, saying I needed to see her immediately. "I found my sister," I said, my voice shaking. She was held captive. I need help." The therapist promised to come the next morning, and I turned back to Emily, curled up on the bed, her breathing shallow. I sat by her side all night, holding her hand, afraid she'd vanish again. Emily woke a few times, mumbling disjointed words. "He said, Mom wasn't an accident," she whispered in a brief moment of clarity. My blood froze. "What do you mean, Emily?" I asked, but she'd already drifted back to sleep. Those words, though vague, confirmed my deepest suspicion. Raymond wasn't just holding Emily captive. He was connected to Mom's death. The next morning, the therapist arrived and examined Emily. "She's severely malnourished, physically and mentally," she said. "She needs to go to the hospital immediately, and we must call the police." I nodded, but I knew the Boone police had once called Raymond a model citizen. I needed evidence, something to pin him down. I thought of Maya, her drawings, and realized she might have seen the basement, heard Emily. That's why she went silent. I knew I had to act quickly. Raymond would return soon, and if he found Emily gone, he'd cover his tracks. I took Emily to the hospital, where doctors treated her and called the police. But I didn't put my faith in them. Back at the apartment, I gathered Maya's drawings and wrote down every detail I could recall about the basement. I wouldn't let Raymond get away, not after what he'd done to my family. Boone Hospital in the early morning was a chaotic place, with the hurried footsteps of nurses and the sharp smell of antiseptic in the air. I sat by Emily's bedside, holding her hand as doctors examined her. She was so thin her skin clung to her bones, her eyes dull from hunger and fear. She's severely malnourished and shows signs of serious psychological trauma, one doctor told me, his voice heavy with sadness. We've called the police. They'll be here soon. By noon, Officer Harris arrived at the hospital. He looked at Emily, then at me, his eyes filled with skepticism. "Mr. Callahan," he said, "you say you found her in a basement under Mr. Holloway's house? Do you have any proof?" I clenched my fists, fighting to keep my anger in check. "Proof? She's lying right here, chained up in a basement for a year. My daughter's drawings. They show the bookshelf and the door to the basement. What more do you need?" Harris took notes, but I saw hesitation in his eyes. "We'll investigate," he said. "But Mr. Holloway is a respected figure here. We need clear evidence before arresting anyone." I wanted to scream, to punch the wall, but I knew it wouldn't help. I handed him Maya's drawings and described the basement in detail, the button under the desk, the iron door. "Go there now," I said, my voice trembling. "He'll cover it up if you wait." I couldn't stay still in the hospital. I left Emily in the doctor's care and drove back to Raymond's mansion. I needed to ensure the police found the basement before he returned. When I arrived, 2 police cars were parked at the gate. Harris and another officer were talking to Helen, the housekeeper, who looked frantic, shaking her head as they asked about the basement. I approached, my voice firm. "The basement's under the office, I'll show you." Harris glanced at me, then nodded. "All right, Callahan. But if this is a mistake, you're in big trouble." I didn't care. I led them to the office, pointing to the bookshelf and the button under the desk. When Harris pressed it, the bookshelf slid open, revealing the iron door. The second officer shone a flashlight down the narrow staircase. The smell of mold and metal wafted up, and I saw Harris frown. They descended into the basement, and I followed, my legs shaking. The basement was small and cold, with the metal bed where I'd found Emily. The chains were still there, along with a few tattered blankets and a filthy bucket in the corner. Harris turned to me, his expression now grave. "We'll bring Holloway in," he said, "but we'll need you to answer more questions." I left the mansion and went to the police station. That evening, Raymond was arrested as soon as he returned from Raleigh. I wasn't there, but Harris called to inform me. "Holloway denies everything," he said. "He claims you're making it up to smear him. But the basement and Emily's condition are undeniable evidence." I gripped the phone, feeling as if a weight had been lifted from my chest. But I knew the story wasn't over. Emily had whispered that Mom's death wasn't an accident. I needed the truth, not just for Emily, but for Mom, for Maya, and for myself. In the days that followed, the police dug deeper. They searched the entire mansion, collected DNA from the basement, and questioned Helen. Under pressure, she admitted to hearing strange noises from the office, but said Raymond threatened to harm her if she spoke up. A neighbor also reported seeing Raymond carry heavy boxes into the house at night, but was too afraid to report it because of his reputation. The pieces were falling into place, but I knew a crucial part was still missing: the truth about Mom. I went back to the police station, demanding they reopen Mom's case. "We ruled it an accident," Harris said, but his eyes were less certain than before. "Given what we know about Holloway, we'll take another look." They pulled old files, reviewed the autopsy report, and found a detail previously overlooked. Mom had bruises on her arm, as if someone had grabbed her tightly before she fell. It wasn't direct evidence, but it was enough to prompt a new investigation into Raymond. Raymond's trial took place 3 months later in the cold Boone winter. I sat in the front row holding Emily's hand, now strong enough to attend. Maya and Lily stayed with Mrs. Carter, as I didn't want them to witness what was coming. Raymond sat in the defendant's chair, still calm, but I saw a flicker of panic in his eyes as the prosecutor presented the evidence. The basement, the chains, Emily's condition, and Helen's testimony. The prosecutor called Emily to the stand. She trembled but grew steadier as she recounted her year of captivity. "He said if I tried to escape, he'd hurt my brother," she said, looking at me, tears streaming down her face. He said he pushed Mom off the cliff to make it easier to take my body. The courtroom fell silent and my heart clenched. Raymond bowed his head, his fake smile gone for the first time. Further investigation uncovered horrifying truths. Raymond hadn't just held Emily captive, he'd abused her for a year. He forced her to write the note to cover his crimes. As for Mom's death, police found a witness, a hiker nearby, who claimed to have seen Raymond push a woman off a cliff but was too scared to report it due to his reputation. Based on Emily's testimony, the bruises, and the new witness, Raymond was charged with murder. The trial ended with Raymond sentenced to life without parole for kidnapping, unlawful confinement, sexual abuse, and murder. As he was led away, I looked into his eyes, no longer smiling, only defeated. But this victory brought no joy. It left a deeper void in my heart. Mom was gone, Emily was irreparably scarred, and Maya, my 5-year-old, had witnessed something so horrific it silenced her. The following spring, Greensboro welcomed me with gentle breezes and soft sunlight, as if nature were trying to soothe the wounds in my heart. My daughters and I had moved back to the city, leaving Boone behind, along with its painful memories and Raymond's cold mansion. Our apartment wasn't luxurious, but it was a place where I hoped to rebuild a home, even if it was just me and the girls. Every evening, as Maya and Lily slept soundly, I sat at the kitchen table looking out the window, reflecting on what I'd lost and what I still held dear. Emily couldn't come live with me right away. After her time in captivity, she needed time and specialized care. I enrolled her in a psychological treatment center in Greensboro, where doctors and specialists helped her slowly reclaim herself. The first time I visited, I saw her sitting in a bright room holding a pencil, drawing a picture of a horse, just like the ones she used to draw as a child. "Silas," she said, her voice weak but with a glimmer of light, "I want to draw everything again." I hugged her, tears streaming down my face, feeling a spark of hope that my sister was still there, despite her deep scars. Maya also began her healing journey. After weeks of therapy, she started speaking again, though only in short sentences. One evening, as I read a bedtime story to the girls, Maya suddenly grabbed my hand and whispered, "Daddy, I saw Aunt Emily in the basement. I was scared." I held her tightly, fighting back tears. "I'm so sorry, Maya. I didn't know. But you were so brave, and Aunt Emily is safe now." She nodded, her eyes still tinged with fear, but I saw a small smile flicker across her face. The first in months. Our healing wasn't easy. Some nights I lay awake, haunted by images of Emily in the basement, Mom's final words, Raymond's fake smile. I wondered if I could have done something different, could have stopped it all if I hadn't left Boone at 18. Guilt followed me like a shadow. But every time I saw Maya and Lily laugh, every time Emily shared a good day at the center, I knew I had to keep going. One spring afternoon, I took Maya, Lily, and Emily to a park in Greensboro. It was our first outing together since everything happened. Emily sat on a bench watching my girls play on the swings, a faint smile on her lips. "I miss the creek in Boone," she said, her voice wistful. "When we were kids, you used to tell me ghost stories there." I smiled, feeling a bit of relief. We sat there under the warm sunlight, watching the girls run and play. I didn't know what the future held. Emily might need years to fully recover, and Maya might always carry the memory of that basement. But I knew we had each other. We were a family, scarred and imperfect, but enough. I looked up at the sky, thinking of Mom, of Dad, of what they'd taught me. "Water is the lifeblood, Silas," Dad had said. I understood it now. Not just about the pipes I fixed, but about the love, connection, and courage that flowed through us, keeping us alive. I held Emily's hand, feeling its warmth, and knew that no matter how painful the past, we would find a way to heal, one day at a time.